Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling full-time trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials across the world. I've met many people during my career and have spent many hours on stage and off with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on the weekends with friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with you. Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today, and my next guest is somebody who I've only recently met but has been in the entertainment and clarinet business for a very long time. I'm not sure why I never worked at Universal Studios, but I'll have to ask him about that. And here he is, Mr. Thomas Mann. Tom, how you doing?
Real good, Dan. How about yourself?
Yeah, you know, it hurts when I do this, but don't do that. Yes, I understand. So yeah, let's start with your family before there was you. Tell me about the showbiz lineage in the Mann family there.
Well, we have some people that were back in the early 1900s, 1920s, late 1800s, that actually worked the Palace on Broadway, which was
So they weren't just snake oil salesmen.
no, one was Claude Kelly and the other was Mildred Keesop.
Oh,
They were actually stars.
I believe you. I wasn't around then, but I have to take your word for it.
I have flyers from Claude that they used to put out at the theater concerning him when he was working.
Gee, I wonder if any of your relatives ever worked with Ralph Reynolds' grandmother. It was Zazu Pitts.
I don't know. I know who she is though.
Yeah. So just curious, all you guys, and me, I'm a son of a poor farmer and a Filipino heiress, but other than that.
My son is married to a Filipino.
Well, that's not my fault. I want you to know.
If you ever saw her, you would know why. She's absolutely beautiful woman.
Well,
and every bit as nice in person as she is in looks.
Wow. Okay, so she's going to have a lot to live up to when she sees this interview. And so, okay, where were you born, sir?
I was born in Pensacola, Florida, back in 1946.
Pensacola.
My dad was a Navy pilot.
Okay, yeah, I think you have a couple of pictures of him up on your Facebook.
Yes, I do. There was a movie made, Lady Takes a Flyer, with Jeff Chandler, and he did all the flying in that movie.
Well, you know, he was a good-looking guy.
Well,
at least in the pictures that you have up.
But by the time I saw him, he was
I understand. Yep. Yes, I too have my kids look at me and say, "What's the big deal?" But that's okay. We understand this.
Yes.
So, Pensacola, Florida. Now, did you attend your elementary school and high school there?
No. From Pensacola, we lived in Panama. I lived in Rhode Island. I lived in Arizona. I lived in Maryland. I lived in Australia. We moved a lot.
Okay, yeah. Well, I was an Army brat too,
Yeah.
and we moved an awful lot. Most of mine was going through the Middle East somewhere. But how did you like Panama? How old were you when you were in Panama?
I was very young then. I was like 4, 5. And then in Australia, I work with dogs is one of the other things that I do. And when I lived in Australia, I actually learned to train sheepdogs.
What kind of are you specializing? Are you specializing in sheepdogs? I had a girlfriend in high school who raised mastiffs and Shih Tzus together.
Okay, I have Akitas now.
Okay.
In the movie business, one of the things that I did was if you saw somebody get attacked by a dog, it was probably a good chance it might have been me at one point in my career.
In a dog suit? No, I'm kidding.
Well, no, actually what you wear is you wear a leather brace underneath your clothes. And hopefully the dog is well trained and grabs the brace. Now, I currently work with Akitas. And the trouble with Akitas is they'll attack one spot right away. And if it doesn't do enough damage, then they go someplace else, which makes them lousy attack dogs.
Oh, because they don't just grind away, huh?
No, they're very good on the attack part, really lousy on the stop on command part. The police hate that.
Well, I would imagine. So you've done a whole bunch of things. You were an athletic coach for a while too?
I still do that. I'm a nationally licensed soccer coach. I've coached high school and college and club, and I've done it for about 44 years, something like that. Uh, I enjoy working with kids.
What
And
are you doing? What do you do in your free time? No, I'm kidding.
But when you work in the entertainment field, as you well know, you have lots of free time, and you have lots of different jobs, and they have a tendency to overlap
Yeah.
because you're never doing just one thing, and you're always looking for the next job while you're working the current job.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you know, I work as a teacher also, and I always tell the kids, the only reason I teach is so I'll have somebody who will help me across the street when I get too old to do it myself.
And that's why I train dogs.
To help attack the kids and try to walk me over the street? No.
Help me across the street and see where I'm going.
That's funny. Now, how old were you when you started playing music?
I was the typical fourth grader. We started band in fourth grade, and the way I became a clarinet player was I went up to my bandmaster. I was kind of a precocious kid, and I said,
No.
"Yeah,
You
true."
precocious? I can't believe it.
And I said, "Excuse me, sir, but you said we march in a parade here in the city of Phoenix." And he said, "Yes." I said, "How long is the parade?" He said, 6 miles. I said, "Well, then what's the lightest instrument?" And he said, "Piccolo." And I said, "I'll play that." He said, "It's already taken." I said, "Well, what's the next lightest instrument?" He said, "Flute." I said, "I'll play that." He said, "It's already taken." Well, we went through trumpet and finally got to clarinet, and there was one of those available.
See, I didn't ask the right questions, obviously. That's interesting. But were your parents musical at all?
Not even a little bit. Matter of fact, my father was extremely athletic, and one of those guys that you hate as a kid, could do everything really well. And the only thing I ever did in my entire life that I think he was jealous of was music, because
Huh.
at one point he went out and bought a $6,000 organ, and he learned about 32 chords, and he would play them in no particular order over and over and over again. And I complained one time. I said, "Dad," I said, "learn a song." He said, "Look," he said, "I had to listen to you squeak and squawk for years." And I said, "Yeah, but I can't send you to your room."
Did he succumb to one of those shopping center salesmen that was selling organs?
No, he just wanted to be a
Oh,
musician.
because I was one of those shopping center organs where you walk through the
Ah,
mall, the guy standing there out front and pumping when the Saints go marching in with two fingers. I was that guy.
ah,
That's why I asked.
okay.
Coolness. Now, so you started on clarinet.
Yes, I did.
Wow.
I played sax for a while, but I just never really, it just didn't appeal to me like the clarinet. I just love the sound of the clarinet.
I do too. But that probably out of all the instruments I play and being a band guy, I had to learn functionality on almost everything. Clarinet was the hardest for me to get my head around because I started on flute and saxophone. And then they hand me that thing with the register key, and I just said, "What is this? That's supposed to jump an octave." Of course, it doesn't. So,
It doesn't. I know that's what makes it hard, because in every octave, the same note is fingered differently. A lot of people don't realize that, and that's what makes the saxophone a lot easier until you get up into the high notes.
yeah, your side keys,
Yeah, side keys. Uh, but but I also
craziness.
but I also learned early on that if you play sax, you have to carry like 5 instruments with you when you go to a job. And then I saw a Benny Goodman movie where he only showed up with his clarinet, and I said, "Wait a minute." And then I learned the most important thing of all, that if you're the leader, you don't even have to be a great player. You've just got to hire great players.
I don't know if you saw my. No, you haven't seen it yet because I haven't published it yet. But I did an interview with a clarinet player from San Diego named Larry Oakman, rather, and he said that same the Benny Goodman story with Steve Allen,
Yes.
is what got him started playing also. It's amazing because
Well,
Steve Allen was really terrible
I
in that
have,
movie.
I have a theory on how to be a good band leader, though.
Okay.
My theory, and I can say that it works because even though I'm a good actor and a hack musician, I made the most money in my life playing music. What you do is you always play songs the trumpet player can play in the key the trumpet player can play them in, at the tempo the trumpet player can play them at. And if you do that, you will be successful.
It's true. It's absolutely true. I can't dispute that at all. But I want to back up a minute because you used to be a stuntman also, yeah?
Yes, I did that for 9 years. Matter of fact, I got out of me. I was originally an actor. My degree is in theater, and I've worked all across the United States in plays. I've done close to 80 plays, which tells you a lot of them closed early.
Uh-huh.
But I worked all across. And then when I came out, I went into the Army, which is a story in itself. But when I got out of the Army, I was doing cabaret in El Paso, Texas. And they have a theater there called the Festival Theater, which does off-Broadway stuff. And I did several shows there. Then I was working at Liberty Hall doing cabaret and got seen there by Carl Reiner and George Shapiro. Now, George Shapiro at that time was the top literary agent with William Morris. And it was a weak company, to be perfectly honest, but I was okay in the part that I was doing. And they happened to like me and said, if you come to Hollywood, look us up. My wife and I at that time had just enough money either to go to Dallas, where I had another job, or go to Hollywood. We flipped a coin, went to Hollywood, and George introduced me to a bunch of people. Nothing hit, but I did meet people that helped my career. And so I did a lot of acting stuff early on.
Cool. Now, is there really a skill to being a stuntman, or is it just somebody who doesn't mind getting hurt for money?
Uh, it depends. It depends on how much money you want to make. When I first started, it was still pretty much hit the ground hard. But then at that time is when they started using stunt coordinators in the films, and then you actually had to know something. You had to know how to set pads and set traps and set wires and all that kind of stuff.
So what were some of the films you worked on, either as an actor or as a stuntman?
Well, I was doing a stunt where it went kind of wrong for me, and I ended up breaking my back in 3 places.
Well, that's not good.
No, and I spent a year in bed. And the day I got out of my back brace, I worked on a low-budget horror picture called Blue Sunshine, where I got thrown down a flight of stairs. And the sad part was that after I did the gag, we had a really bad director, and he didn't know how to set the shot. So we kept going through frame very fast, and he kept getting upset because we were going frame through frame too fast. And so we finally had to tell him how to set the camera, but we shot it 5 times. And after that, I started to get the tremors a little bit because I'd never been really scared of doing anything. And I went outside. We were over in Hollywood, not in Hollywood Central, but over there by Universal, in a country and western bar. And I just went out and sat on the ground, and I said, I don't want to go through 2 more years of learning to walk again and laying in a bed for a year. So I said, what else can I do? And I remembered I played clarinet. And I happen to be the kind of musician everybody hates. And by that, what I mean is that I'm always at the right place at the right time. I don't get jobs because I'm good. I get jobs because I can hire good people. And,
well, that's kind of the key to success in any business, though.
Well, I worked for Shakey's for 20 years. I worked for Universal for 14. I was out at Disneyland subbing for 2 years, and always with my own band. So it was kind of just one of those things. I got my acting agent I was walking through a business section over in Burbank, and they had just started their agency. Walked in, said, "Hi, are you looking for actors?" They said yes, and that's how I got my first agent.
Well, good for you. Now, what are some of the movies that we can see you in that you've done? You mentioned a
Uh,
couple to me in the past. They've lost my mind. They've blown
well,
away.
gosh, when you work stunts, you don't really remember all that. You show up, you do the job, you talk to the coordinator, you figure out what you're doing, where you're going. Uh,
You were doing a lot of westerns, weren't you?
I did a bunch in the beginning, and then I did because I did horse work, and I did motorcycle work. Those were two things. I actually used to race motorcycles a bit. I was a flat tracker back in my days, and I did that while I was actually in the Army. I did 2 years in the Army, uh, which got me into music. I started off, showed up in basic training, and my handball partner in college turned out to be my company commander in my basic training company, and he took me off post. And there was a talent contest. He said, "You have a degree in theater, do something." So I got up on stage, I did a comedy routine, and won that contest. My orders came down. This was back in 1969 when Vietnam was hot and heavy. And my orders came down to ship off to go to Fort Ord to be a rifleman. They changed them there at Fort Bliss so I could represent Fort Bliss back at the 4th Army Talent Contest. I went back and I won that. And so then I toured with the USO show. And when I came back, we only toured in the US, by the way. We
Ah,
I never left the States. Came back to Fort Bliss, and they wanted to make me a company clerk, but I was an E3 and you had to be an E5. And so they rigged an audition, got me into the 427th Army Band, to make a long story longer. And so I spent my 2 years in the Army in the 427th and the 62nd Army Bands.
that's good. Hey, getting paid to play is never a bad thing, you know?
Well, we had actually terrific musicians. You know, everybody that's in an Army band goes through the Navy School of Music,
Yeah.
except for me. I didn't. I got in just by accident. And the funny part was I was playing for Shakey's there in El Paso, which at that time was the #1 Shakey's in the United States. And I was playing with a country and Western band. And because I sing, that was, I could play just enough to get through a song. It was piano, bass, and clarinet. And then I did a lot of singing. And so that I was making more money than anybody else in the band playing outside.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I've got a bunch of ex-students who have gone into the military services, and they say because of band marching training that they had no problems with boot, and then they got paid to play, you know, as long as they kept enlisted. And so good for them. That's a lesson to all of you young musicians out there, by the way.
We had what our band was. We actually did concerts during the summer where there would be 5,000 and 6,000 people come to our concerts there in El Paso. And our first three horns in every section had graduated from the Texas Tech band. And like I said, I was playing third clarinet badly, and the guys that were ahead of me were terrific. And our bandmaster was a fabulous clarinet player. I mean, he was embarrassingly good. Ended up in the Army because he had gone down and tried out for the Chicago Symphony. They called him and said he didn't make it. And so he went down and joined the Army. And the very next day they called and said, "We made a mistake. You were the one that's supposed to be in," but he was in the Army.
Wow. You know, I think you're right. You said you've talked about it having all the luck in the world and how you accidentally fall into these things. How did you accidentally fall into Universal Studios?
Okay, I read in the trade papers that they were putting on a show up there called Dracula. And so I went up and tried out for Dracula and got in it, and I played Renfield up there. And that was a lot of fun. When my contract ended up there, I happened to be walking through the park, and a friend of mine said they're having trouble on the outside in the parking lot, because in those days Universal was very small, and the parking lot, the people would come in and actually would stand for sometimes up to an hour and a half just to get into the park. There was no shade in the area where you went in. And so I talked Universal into hiring a band to entertain all those people who were getting upset standing in the sun. And we actually got our name. We got named by the head of Universal Studios. He came up, and there was one telephone pole in that area. And we used to stand in the shade of that telephone pole, and we would literally move as the shade moves, the three of us in a line, because the band that they hired was a trombone, a clarinet, and a banjo. That was our band.
And who was that in the original band?
The original band, the trombone trumpet player was Bill Jackson, and the banjo player was Al Vescovo.
Oh my!
And I played the clarinet. And Al and I worked. Al worked in my bands for years up there, and then we became very popular with the people when you have nothing else to do and you're in the sun. But we got high ratings, and so they moved me inside and gave me a tuba player. And at that time, I hired Richard Maloof. And Richard then became a godsend to me because he knew every number one gun in town. And so I was getting a lot of private parties. I did things like I got hired when they opened the Lucy exhibits to play all the parties for the bigwigs. When Warner Brothers bought back their studio, I got hired to do all the employee parties over at Warner Brothers when they bought it back from Sony. I opened the Michael Jackson thing at Disneyland. I opened the Star Tours ride at Disneyland. Matter of fact, the Star Tours is my favorite thing. I probably should not tell this. Disneyland would have a heart attack. But I actually played 4 hours at Universal that same day, and then we played that night at Disney, and we had people that had seen us at both places and said, "We saw you at Universal." I said, "Well, don't tell Disney."
Did you change costumes?
Yeah, when we played at Disney, we worked as the side street struthers. We either wore that really ugly striped green and yellow thing, or we wore the blue outfits, depending on what was available.
Now, who else went through the Universal band? You've had a lot of luminaries go through that band.
The name of guys that I've worked with over the years. Did I ever mention that I started with Judy Carmichael and Howard Alden?
No, you didn't.
Judy had the job, and she was playing at a place called the Tail of the Whale down the Balboa Peninsula. And I used to go down and sit in with her. And now I'm a swing player. I'm not really a Dixieland player. And so I'm a 4-beat guy. And Judy, as you know, plays very good stride and very strong and very fast. And she increased the speed that I could play at tremendously because I had to make my licks fit in the smaller spaces that she was giving me to work within. And then Howard came in. And in those days, he only played banjo that I knew of. But I knew he was a genius the first night I met him.
Well, it was funny. He was playing a little bit of washboard at Disney, too. So.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Howard actually gave me my biggest compliment as a clarinet player.
I can't imagine that, so I'm ready for embraced.
He told me one time after we had worked a thing, he said, "Tom," he said, "technically, you are one of the finest clarinet players I have ever heard. And if you ever learn music, you're going to really be good."
That sounds like Howard. That's funny. Yeah, you were there for how many years?
I was up at Universal for 14 years.
Wow.
I was up there. They didn't want to be like Disneyland. And so what they didn't want music. And so once we moved in, we became a very popular attraction. And Universal used this as you know, up there where you have trams, they break down quite often. And whenever there was a breakdown, they would shoot us right down to wherever that was, and we would play for the upset people. And as I look at music, which gets me into a lot of trouble with the good players, as entertainment. And
it is entertainment.
But I look at that, that's how you keep your job. make people happy. Uh, you know, way too often, really good players, somebody will ask for the Saints, and you've played the Saints 10 million times. And as soon as somebody goes, oh God, the Saints, the people feel bad. So when somebody asks for a tune, I make them think like that's the first time we've ever played it and haven't heard it in 7 years. And thank you for requesting that song.
One of the bands I played in, I was always trying to get them to carry a cassette player with us that has Saints on the cassette. And when people came up and asked them, you hand them the cassette with some headphones. So, here you go. But no, I agree with that. If you've watched, and you've told me you've watched a few of these interviews, it comes up. I bring it up constantly that we forget you forget why you're getting paid.
Yeah.
A lot of the finest musicians forget why they're getting paid, and that's because people take their money out of their pockets and hand it to you.
Well, there's lots of people that I like to work with that are that way, and they get upset with me sometimes because I will tell jokes, I will try to do funny things with the horn sometimes, and my rides, as you well know, I am not a trad player by any stretch of the imagination, because I can play in any key, almost any song, because every key that I ever learned, I learned certain licks that fit in that key. So I don't really know what I'm doing. I just know that if I'm in a certain key, I can do certain things and it will be close. And I play fast enough, I can get off of bad notes real quick.
You know, there's a standing joke with guys who play casuals. When you call a song, they say, "Okay, my solo fits over that." But it's true in your case, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, you're silly.
But it allowed me to do some strange. One of the best players I worked with was a piano player by the name of Arnie Burquest, and Arnie and I met out at the Old Town Mall. Happened to walk in on a day when they were looking for musicians, and Arnie was there that same day, and Doug O'Brien, who was a banjo player, ran the Old Town Mall, the entertainment there, and they were looking for somebody to play for the Can-Can Girls, and so we ended up piano and clarinet playing for the Can-Can Girls, and then they would send us down the mall. They had pianos stationed down the mall, and we would play an hour here, an hour there, and that's how we met. But Arnie was from Sweden. He actually was from Sweden, and his claim to fame was that he had played for Björsi Yearling, who was one of my favorite opera singers. I probably didn't mention, but I actually started off thinking I was going to be an opera singer. I have a range in my real voice from low G to E above high C, and that's without going into falsetto.
Wow. Hang on a second.
Not a problem.
Turn my phone off. Aaron, hang on.
Well,
Aaron, here. That was Tom Leslie calling for some reason. But you can recall him if you want to. I'm sorry.
But I was going to say that. But the problem with that was that most men singers, shall we say, don't make money in opera until you're in your mid 40s to 50s, and you have roughly a 10-year career. And after that, you live off of whatever people thought you did 10 years earlier. My problem was I got switched over to jazz and was making money at it, and as a consequence, because I had this huge range, I never got to sing in the keys that I wanted to sing in. I always had to sing in the key that the band could play that particular song in. And I had enough range that I could do that. So I never became really famous.
But once again, that makes you employed.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And that's something you've touched on several times in this interview that's actually a really important lesson for those who want to become musicians as an avocation. And that is the fact that if you really want to get the work, you have to hustle for it. You know, I know so many excellent musicians who think the phone's going to ring. They sit at their house and practice and can't understand why they're not getting any work. And if you're not getting any work, you've got to go out and generate it, for Pete's sake. You know, and that's something you've actually aced throughout your life, is hustling and creating work for yourself.
I got a kick out of, on one of your interviews that I actually listened to, that you were talking about playing oompa music down at the Old World in Huntington Beach. At the Old World at the festival. Well, Arnie Burquest actually knew every German song that had ever been written, and we played the German bars there in Carson. Now, I couldn't pronounce the name of one song we played, but I could put polka licks in everything. He would play the melodies, I'd play polka licks, and we worked 3 months almost straight down there just
As long
doing
as you
that.
can run your arpeggios, you've got that gig, right?
Yes, yes.
I know, in fact, there's a couple of famous clarinet players who I won't mention. I remember I was standing, and of course you'll like this reference. I was standing next to Larry Wright at some jazz performance, and we were both watching the stage, and some guy was just playing just fire on his clarinet. And I turned to Larry. I said, "Who's the polka player?" And I thought he was going to die. He thought that was the funniest thing.
Larry Wright's one of my favorite players.
Oh,
and
on everything.
On everything. I mean, I've worked with him when he was on piano. When he's playing sax, banjo, and
he's a dandy drummer on top of it.
And he makes me feel bad because he takes his music serious, and he gets mad at me because if I was as good as him, I would take it serious too. Les Deutsch is another one, but Les is much nicer.
Yes. Did you see the interview with Les?
Yes, I did.
Oh, he was delightful to interview. You have to be able to match wits with him before he gives you any respect. You have to be just as acerbic.
Well, he got me playing something that I have never used yet on a job, but where you're doing arpeggios going up a half step each time on the piano as a lick, and and so now I've got it down. And now I'm trying to learn how to do it going down as well as going up. I go up fine, but going down is tough.
Well, all I got to say is you play well enough to fool 99% of the public, and that's all we're doing anyway, any of us,
Well, the other thing is I rarely get to play songs in the style to which I play. Like I'm a swing player, but as you know, most of the guys we play with are two beat players. And I don't that's not my strong suit anyway, but I can sing the tunes.
Well, as you probably noticed, I like to play 4-beat too, which is
Yeah.
Very often looked down upon. But my philosophy is if it swings, do it. It doesn't matter if it's 2-beat or 4-beat or 5-beat or East African music, whatever. If you can make it swing harder, it's what you do,
You can do so much more with 4-beat as far as the melodic line. And that's why when I hear really good players, I like to hear them do that, because you go and you listen to the old jazz players, the sax players and the guys that through the 30s, 40s, and 50s. The good stuff they're doing is because they have time to do it, and they have time to build it into something. Where so often when you're with the other, it's repetitious.
Yeah.
For me that works. For me that works out good because that's how I play, repetitious. But when I go hear somebody that's really good, I like when they can do incredible things.
Well, sure, but once again, if the audience doesn't get it, what good is it?
Yeah.
I mean, on the other hand, I was actually, as you know, one of my other interests in life is marching groups. Since I taught marching band in high school, and I taught drum and bugle corps and things. Very similar discussions happen in that idiom, where that people have forgotten that they're there because the audience wants to see them. It's really funny because that's kind of what killed jazz in the 50s when bebop came along.
Yes.
Everybody on stage started playing for each other or playing for themselves and left the audience out of the equation.
Well, I have my joke about that is that anytime I hit a clunker, I always say it's a 13th. And then I hit it again, so they think I did it on purpose.
Well, I think that's the basis of a lot of modern jazz anyway. But we won't get into that. I'm controversial enough as it is.
Well, the interesting thing is the amount of tunes that people knew. When I started off as a singing bartender when I was in college.
You were Joe the bartender?
Oh. I was Joe the bartender, and I met a piano player by the name of Jack McGrath, and he was out of Texas, but he had been hired specifically by Shakey's to come in and play there in Tucson. Terrific player. And so I would come up and sing, and then it became more and more popular with me coming up and doing that. And so one night he turned to me and he said, "Do you play anything?" And I said, I play clarinet. He said, "Do you know any tunes?" I said, "But the problem is I only know one, and that's Moonlight Serenade." And he said, "Bring your horn in." So that was how I got started playing, was at a Shakey's, and we played Moonlight Serenade maybe 9 times that. But he started teaching me songs. And Shakey's in those days had the sing-along on the wall. And we had these carousels that had 77 tunes in each carousel, and we had 9 carousels, each with different tunes. And that's where I learned tunes. And I just learned, and the other thing was I learned where each note was on my horn. So if I hear it, even if I may miss if it's a little bit strange. The other thing I learned was that there's only like 7 different types of changes. And so,
yeah, I tell people that if you learn 12-bar blues, I got rhythm, and a few honeysuckle rows, then you pretty much have the book.
well, I got to tell you, that's how I knew Howard was a genius. I was playing with Judy, and Howard came in the first night I met him, and she took off on Kitten on the Keys, which is a song that doesn't follow a logical progression. And Howard laid out the first time through the song, then he played lead the second time through the song, and my mouth dropped open.
Wow.
On the banjo. And I went, my God. And then he turned out to be that guy. He was really young at that time.
But like I said in his interview, I think it was Downbeat that said the only question about Howard Alden is he one of the world's greatest guitar players, or is he the world's greatest guitar player?
Oh, you can go out and find him out on the net doing things that you go, I didn't even know that could go together. Beautifully, just a genius.
Yeah, it's great to see. It's great to see him happy and married and
Yes.
living the life.
Well, he didn't have it easy in the beginning.
Oh, I know.
But
So now, most of your playing is done now at the same jazz clubs I frequent quite often.
yes, I play for free quite often.
Well-
I made it a point for many years never to play for free.
Well, truth be known, I usually get gas money for most of my appearances somewhere, but
Well, I count food as being paid,
well, that's musicians pay. What are you talking about?
especially in the early days.
Especially with pizza parlors. Yes,
Yes.
I used to play. You remember Bill Mitchell?
Oh, I worked with Bill.
Yeah,
Bill.
he and I worked together, and I played washboard at Shakey's all the way through Orange County. And that was in, Dan, you want to come down and play? And I'd say, what does it pay? He goes, it pays a pizza and a beer. And I say, I'm there.
Well, you worked with God, what were they called? The famous Dixie band over there in Hollywood, with Mike Silver.
You're talking about Proberts?
No, Mike Silverman and
Hot Frogs.
Hot Frogs. But what was fun was I was playing Shakey's over in West LA over there, and Mike used to come in every night. Then we were playing 7 nights a week. And Mike used to come in almost every night and play with us over there. And what was funny was when I went to hear the Hot Frogs, I could not believe the bandstand stuff that was going on that never came up when we were playing. And he could play some beautiful swing stuff.
Mike Silverman told me something because towards the end of Mike's health problems, I had to sub for him a couple times on trumpet with the Hot Frogs, and he told me something that just blew my mind because I was trying to figure out how to play an out chorus next to Joe Ashworth and those guys.
Yeah.
And he took me aside and he said, Dan, he goes, I know you arrange big band stuff, right? I said, yeah. He goes, just play an out chorus. Just play what you would arrange for the lead trumpet player on an out chorus. I went, that's brilliant. Because I never thought of it in that context.
Did God, who? Let me. I wrote some of these things down so that I would be able to find people. Uh, did you ever know a trumpet player by the name of John Swan?
No, I've heard of him. I didn't never got to meet him.
Well, he worked for me for about 4 years up at Universal. And matter of fact, when John had an aneurysm, and when that happened, I quit playing music. I had worked for so many years to build a band that was just sensational. And like I said, I had Alvis Scovo was playing banjo, guitar, and steel for me. I had Richard Malouf was playing tuba, both string bass and regular tuba, and could do the same stuff on a keyboard if we needed it. And I had John Swan on trumpet. John Swan had worked with Mara Manavani back in New York. He was out of Canada. Somewhere in this vast array of mess in my office here, I've got a cassette of him doing all of the signature tunes from all the big name trumpet players from the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Was that on the Mantovani side?
No, that was,
okay.
This was just a recording that he did. And he had done it for a jazz station in Canada. And he other than Harry James, who I happen to think was a great player, and the guy that played with Pete Fountain down in New Orleans,
Al Hurt.
Al Hurt. You know, there's 3 or 4 guys in our business that you go, my God, but John was that guy. I only have one recording of one set that we did up at Universal, because a friend of mine had come in, and it was our last set of the day, and it was 113 degrees, and we were out in the sun, and we had already put in 4 hours up there, and but I let people listen to that set, and you go, who's the trumpet player? And because he had played all over the world, and he was a fabulous reader, he played symphony, but he could do anything in the style to which it was. He had played with South American bands. So we once went 7 days up at Universal, never repeating the song. For me, it didn't matter because I was always doing the same licks, but the other guys actually had to know the music.
That's wonderful. I can imagine. The reason I asked you about Mantovani is growing up. I don't know if you know this, but I spent 5 years from when I was 4 till I was 10 in Turkey, in the country of Turkey. My father was a contractor for the armed forces. So that means that I was brought up solely listening to albums. When we got back to the States, they had a collection of over 2,000 LPs. And that was my musical upbringing, was probably 10 or 20 years older than I was. And so I have all that Perez Prado and Mantovani and all these things. For somebody my age, it's way too old of a musical memory. And that's how Glenn Miller became my favorite big band. It was just by the records that my parents had, you know?
Yes. Well, I had a similar thing because I used to get up every Saturday morning as a kid. And my father had a tremendous record collection. And I used to go in and I would sit for roughly 3.5, 4 hours every Saturday morning playing one record after another. And when I first started playing, that was how I tried to learn tunes. Matter of fact, I would listen to the Pete Fountain albums and I could play note for note what he was doing. But the trouble when I went in on a job was the guys behind weren't playing the same notes. And so I could never remember what it was I was supposed to do.
That's great. Well, listen, Tom, this has been just a lot of fun. I'm so happy you agreed to do this. And I think you're way too humble as far as your playing is concerned. I mean, I always enjoy our sets together. And we've done quite a few now. Now that in the short time that we've known each other, I think I played a lifetime with you already. That didn't sound right.
Well,
anyway.
Let me leave you with one last thought.
Sure, please do.
And this will describe my playing perfectly. And it comes from my wife. For the first, we've been married 51 years, but for the first 20 years we were married, she came to everything I did. I'm short and dumpy, but women find me attractive. And she was making sure they didn't find me too attractive. But anyway, so nowadays I always ask her when I'm going out to play, would you like to come to the job? And she says, no, she said, are you going to play the same songs? And I said, no, we're going to play some different songs. And then she says, are you going to use the same notes? And I said, yeah, most of them. She said, then I've heard it.
It's I think it's true of almost every musician that's been married for over 20 years. My wife's the same way. When we met each other and I was still a high note trumpet player in college, she came to everything I did. She came to my Latin band gigs and my big band jobs and all the concerts I did for schools and things. And she ended up with a fat overweight tuba player. So what does that tell you? But for a while there, I played bass in a surf band, and she loved that. She came to every one of those gigs. But it's interesting. Well, Tom, thank you so much. I hope we get in a situation where we can do this again soon, playing that is.
I agree.
And
I fear for the industry because it's going to be hard for clubs to come back just money wise.
yeah. In fact, from what I know, there's still a big question whether or not Curly's is gonna be there when we return. You know.
Yeah.
What can I say? All right, sir. Thank you so much for jumping in and doing this for me at the last minute. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for the invite.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope you can continue to enjoy my interviews.
I do.
If you see it, being somebody who's been in the business as long as you have, if you see anything you think I should know about or be wary of in my interview style, let me know.
Can I ask you one question?
Absolutely.
You mentioned Jimmy Peel a while back in one of your interviews. Now, I opened the Alhambra Shakey's we're talking years and years ago. And at that time, he was a banjo player. And then later I heard he became a trumpet player. Did you know him in that capacity?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
It may have been somebody else I was interviewing.
Yeah.
But
because he was a fun guy, and he was somebody that played with Judy Carmichael and I sometimes down there too when Howard wasn't there. Just nice. And Judy, my gosh, what a terrific player. I'm so happy that things are going good for her back in New York.
I agree.
Anyway, but again, Dan, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan shows new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.